From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laural Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. In this episode of Straight Talk, we are pleased to recognize the achievements of someone many of you are familiar with and admire. She is one of KGW's most illustrious alums, journalist Ann Curry, who was a reporter here in the early 80s. Earlier this month, Ann Curry received the Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award in Journalism from Washington State University's Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. She was recognized for her extensive career in journalism, including international reporting on human suffering and genocide. In honoring her, the school drew attention to her reporting on wars in the Middle East and Africa. She was the first network news anchor to report on the refugee crisis caused by genocide in Kosovo in 1999. She also reported on the violence and ethnic cleansing in Darfur and Chad. The dean of the school said Curry's work stands as a testament to using communication for the common good. Curry grew up in Ashland, Oregon. She graduated from the University of Oregon. She's a duck through and through.
Once a duck, always a duck.
Curry got her first TV jobs in Medford and then at KGW in Portland, before eventually becoming the second longest serving news anchor on NBC's Today Show. When she left NBC in 2015, Curry founded her own media company, producing TV shows and documentaries with a focus on coverage of life-changing human stories with impact. Ann stopped in Portland after receiving her award, and I had the chance to sit down with her at the Behind the Museum Cafe. Here's part of our conversation. Ann Curry, thank you so much for joining us here on Straight Talk. It's nice to have you back here in Portland. We're at the beautiful Behind the Museum Cafe, and you've been here before.
Oh, it's one of my favorite places, and hello to Oregon. It's always such a warm hug whenever I've come back, and just to walk around downtown Portland, even now as it's emerging from COVID, it's like good medicine. It's really great to be back.
Well, welcome
so hello
back.
Portland, and hello Oregon.
And congratulations to you on your Edward R. Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award from the Murrow School of Communications at WSU, honoring your extensive career. I mean, that must have been a momentous occasion to receive that award.
It really was. I mean, I've had three former colleagues just invite themselves. My husband even invited himself. I didn't want to ask anybody, to make the big trip, but they all wanted to come because it is a big deal, mostly I think because of Edward R. Murrow's high ideals of integrity and courage and also humanity. And I think that, for anyone, I think, to have their work sort of be compared to that is, incredibly humbling and of course delightful. And on top of that, it really targeted the specific work that I've been sort of almost secretly doing, trying to sort of not talk too much about it, but just making sure that I was in a position to argue for it and get it on television. And that is the work that gives an opportunity for people who are the least among us, those who are, and especially those who suffer, those who are not heard, to give them a chance to speak and be heard by the largest audience I could muster. And so that's been my secret, well, not secret, but just my persistent, almost not too much spoken plan, which is, and really I can say it's been the thing since the Pacific Northwest all the way to New York and beyond, probably the single most important factor I would think about every time I made a major career decision. Can this lead me to that? And it did, and here I am. So it's not for all of that, but also I need to say, Laural, I know you've only asked one question, but I need to say that Oregon made all this possible, even this award. I mean, if it wasn't for Mrs. Hattie Converse, my English teacher at Ashland Senior High School, insisting that I go to college, even though my family couldn't afford it, even though no one in my family, in the history of my family, had ever graduated from college. And it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have gone to the University of Oregon and studied journalism And if it wasn't for the Carpenter Foundation in Medford, Oregon, which gave me a little scholarship that gave me hope that I could get through. So, you always have people so it's not really your award, really, it's a bunch of others, as people's as well.
In the kind of reporting that you do, you have to have faith in humanity, that they'll open their hearts. And of all the reporting that you've done, is there a story or two that really stuck with you through the years?
There's so many. How much time do you have? There's so many stories. I think one story that though has really stayed with me is the story of Sifa. There are many stories, but Sifa was a young woman in Congo in a war that was little covered. More people had died in that war, and women were particularly being targeted in that war, which is ongoing. It's changed, but it still persists. More people had died than at that time than in Afghanistan and Iraq combined. And we were trying to basically document what was happening to women there, and so we went in and we found a hospital where a doctor was really upset that the world wasn't paying attention. And without thinking, he just led our crew directly into an operating room where we saw this little girl. She was a teenager, maybe in her 16, 17. She was naked under a blanket. She was shivering. Her hand was on the metal table next to her and it was shaking. And as any one of us would, you want to, and I didn't know why we were in there, but I could see her fear, and so I held her hand and tried to make her feel a little bit better. And before I said to the team, we should not be here, so we backed out from where we should not have been. And the next day when we went, I remember asking her what had happened, telling her who we were, apologizing for barging in, and asking her if she would tell us her story, and she did, and she told us her name was Sifa, that she had seen these rebel soldiers under this rebel leader named Laurent Nkunda, who we later interviewed, how they had come in and they had killed her parents right in front of her, and then they took her and kept her for months, and they chained her to a tree, taking her wherever they went. And when they finally decided that she wasn't worth anything to them anymore, they left her chained to a tree. And she talked about how she cried out for help, and how men from a nearby village heard her cries and came and cut the chains and carried her to the hospital where we found her. So that's when I asked her, "Do you want revenge?" And she said, "No. What I want is to rise from this bed. I want to thank the men who rescued me and carried me to safety. I want to work for God. And if there is a chance, I want to feel a mother's love again." That's a voice that we all need to hear, of a young woman with that kind of depth. And the phones lit up at NBC Nightly News when that story ran. People were calling, wanting to protect her, defend her, contribute, do something all over America. People in America who had never knew about this war now knew something about it. They didn't know this child's language, and yet they cared about her. They didn't know her culture, and yet they cared about her. And in fact, they may not, all of them, even have easily found, the Democratic Republic of Congo on a map. I mean, it's, we don't think about it. And yet they wanted to save her. They opened their hearts, not because they saw a little girl in Africa. They saw their mother. They saw their sister. They saw their daughter. They opened their hearts up to a human being. And that is what we are supposed to do.
You talked in your keynote speech about integrity in journalism. You have been a champion of a renaissance in journalism, defending the truth. You and I are of an age, we grew up watching Walter Cronkite with our families, and he was the most trusted man in America. How would you describe where we are today in journalism when it comes to trust?
Well, journalism has never been a popular thing, right? And I always say to young journalists, people want to become journalists. If you want to be popular, don't become a journalist, because you need to not think about being popular. You need to ask people hard questions with respect. You need to tell people what they don't want to hear with respect. But on the other hand, if you are earnest and you are pure in your motives, if you give people the facts that they need to know so that they can make up their own minds, which is I care very much about. And that's, I think, why Walter was so trusted. Walter Cronkite, who I got to meet at one point, my hero, I got to meet him. The reason I think he was so trusted is because when he had an opinion, he marked it. He let you know it was going to be an opinion. But when he was not telling you an opinion, what he was trying to do, and what you felt from him, was that he was trying to give you, he respected you enough to give you the facts so that you could make up your own mind. He wasn't trying to persuade you with that tone of voice or that extra adjective or that word that didn't have to be there. And I think that that's exactly the opposite of what we're seeing today. Look, Walter Cronkite lived in a time when America, when the world was not awake on so many issues that should have been covered. It was largely a male, Caucasian male-dominated profession in which there were so many stories that weren't covered that involved women and people who are not Caucasian and male that need now that we're awakened to, and we're smarter about our world and how we have to reflect and pay attention to stories about all kinds of people. So, and that's what we've evolved to become more of. But I think because of the technological revolution and its devastation on journalism, murdering thousands of newspapers in the last 15 years, local newspapers which have been the glue for trust in our communities. And I believe there's a direct link between the dramatic increase in mistrust in journalism and the death of these local newspapers, and the pressure on local television and national newspapers and national magazines to become more bombastic, to become less thoughtful, to take less time to sort of look at how to make sure that they're striving to get, to fulfill their mandate, the mandate of accuracy and independence and accountability and humanity, and yes, fairness, with an eye always to the truth as your North Star. There was a great bit of advice from an old journalist. His nickname was Spud. I was a young kid, brand new out of college, reporting. And one time I was working with a bunch of other reporters, including Spud, on a story. We all stopped to have a beer. And so I'm having a beer with these older reporters. And Spud looked at me, he goes, "Curry, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't trust anyone." And I said, "Don't trust anyone?" He says, "No, I don't trust anyone. Everybody wants to tell you the story as they want it told. Don't even trust your mother." I said, "Don't trust my mother?" He said, "No, even she has an axe to grind." And then he said, "You know what? Don't even trust yourself." Which I thought was the most important line. We all come forward with biases. We all want to believe. We all feel more comfortable with certain kinds of stories. And that's why that's the job of journalists that people don't get. Our job is to try to go past to work in that painful way, to think through it so that we can open up our own blinders past our biases, to try to keep looking, just insisting, asking, looking for something that may not be the truth.
Well, what advice do you have for consumers of news, our viewers? How can they be defenders of the truth?
Well, don't put up with it. I think don't put up with. Why do you put up with someone telling you what to think? Do you not dare to think for yourself? Why do you only pay attention to those who tell you what you already know, what you already have agreed to? Why not challenge yourself? Why not allow yourself to feel maybe a little uncomfortable if it's possible that what you might hear might be more the truth than what you think? Why not open up your mind? And I think that what I would say is that we should all demand. I yell at my TV just as my father used to. And I don't listen when I turn it off, when someone is trying to persuade me into thinking something or trying to manipulate me with only one side or a piece of the facts of a story. I don't let them pollute my mind. Why do you?
Why do you think journalism, in particular local journalism, really matters right now?
Local journalism is critical because it understands and it can answer the needs of a local community, right? So, and also because, you're my gal, you're in my town. I feel like I can trust you because you know my town, you know my city, you know where I go and shop, and so you might care about being in my town, right? So you want to be represented, you want your needs, and also I can call you up and say, I didn't like that story. Why did you do this? Why did you ask that question? And also I can call you and say, I think you should do a story about this. So that local news is really, to me, it's the glue. I think the reason the East and West Coast was so surprised that Donald Trump won the presidency was because of the death of local newspapers, because they weren't paying attention to Middle America, because Middle America was not being listened to, was not being heard. So if we want to know ourselves, we need local news. And if we want to be connected to each other, we need local news. The social media, what it's doing with its algorithms is, in addition to giving us a lot of fun and all the kinds of, and also helping us in many different ways, its algorithms are isolating us. It's giving us only what we're looking for, and only what we're looking for is making us more and more alone. It's making our worlds less big, and it's making our world smaller. And so in this way, it's limiting us, and this is not healthy. Local news expands us, makes us think about somebody over there in that part of the city that I don't know. Local news makes us pay attention to our community and why we should care about it. So to me, it's a linchpin.
We'll have more with Ann Curry right after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. Ann Curry left Oregon in the 1980s, and her career took her around the world. She makes her home now in Connecticut, but as you'll hear, her heart is still in Oregon.
You got your award from WSU, but you are a duck. You went to the University of Oregon.
I am.
I know Oregon has a special place in your heart, even though your life and career have taken you all over the world. What does Oregon mean to you?
Oregon, the University of Oregon?
Just Oregon, the state of Oregon being back in.
I wonder if I could ever have had the life that I've had it not been the nurturing I've had in this great state. I think Oregonians don't realize, I really don't think you know, and I now live in the East Coast, I don't think you really know, and I don't think I knew when I was living here, how great the state is. I mean, everything is here, and I think you underestimate. I think Oregonians underestimate this state and themselves as a result. I don't know why this state should not aspire to be the best state. It has everything: the beauty of the ocean, the beauty of the mountains, the beauty of the snow, the valleys, the hiking, this great medical school you have here in Portland, and just the drive, the walks, the goodness of the people. There's so much to lift you, and I think so much focus has been paid on what is not so great. Every state has stuff that's not so great, and paying attention to that and fixing it is what this state can do if it can get more resources and be in a situation where it can really think through its problems and prioritize solutions. There is no reason why this state should not aspire to be even more, but wow, is it great. And I mentioned earlier the nurturing I got in Southern Oregon. My father, when he retired from a career in the military, started subscribing to local newspapers to figure out where he was going to finish raising his family. We had been all over the world, and we were in Norfolk, Virginia when he retired. And one of the papers he subscribed to was the Ashland Daily Tidings. And one day he read in the Ashland Daily Tidings, on the front page, he saw the mayor's wife's bean soup recipe on the front page, and he said, "Dag nabbit, that's the town for me." So he loaded all of us up in the station wagon, and he drove all across country to Ashland, Oregon. And I thought, "Dad, where are we?" Because Ashland was maybe 15,000, maybe 14,000 then, and it was such a small town. It had great schools. I got so lucky Ashland Senior High School. I had a great English teacher, I had a great debate coach. The school just had everything. And then it had the Ashland Shakespearean Festival, and I didn't understand half of what Shakespeare was trying to let us know, but I was learning about it. And then people were coming in from out of town, these tourists, and they had accents, and they came from England, and I worked in a bookstore, and they asked me questions, and I got to understand the world a little bit better outside of Ashland, and it was a great place. And then I got a scholarship, and I had, my English teacher made me go to college, and I applied my senior year after everybody had already applied, because there was no way I was going to go to college. My father had just started going on the GI Bill for the first time, going to college. And nobody had ever gone to college before in our family. And so with this little scholarship from Carpenter Foundation in Medford, Oregon, and when Mrs. Hattie Converse made me go to that front office and I had to apply, there was only one college that could accept that I could even afford the fee to apply to. I could only afford one, and only one college was still accepting applications, and that was the University of Oregon. And so I applied and had a J school, a journalism school. So I just got super lucky. And boy, the University of Oregon just opened up my mind to everything I got to study everything, from wonderful brainiac teachers, and I felt really insecure, but I just was eating it all up. And then my first jobs were in Oregon, in Medford, and here in Portland. I got to work at KGW, and which at that time was owned by Dorothy Bullock, and gosh, we got to cover so many great stories, and I fell in love with this part of Oregon too, and so much so I didn't want to leave it when I was offered a job in Los Angeles, but I did, but I've never really let go of Oregon, and I come back all the time. I have people here, both my sisters are now here. I've got nieces and nephews. We've helped put one of my nephews through school. He's now a nurse practitioner here in Portland. And so yeah, I've got another niece who lives down in Southern Oregon. And so yeah. I've got friends here now who are trying to get me to move back to Oregon. So sending me real estate notices, and hey, what about this place? And so, and my husband's seriously interested, so we'll see.
Well, I hope you come back. Oregon
Thank you.
Loves you.
And
you came to KGW in the early 80s after Medford. What do you remember about your days at KGW?
Oh, we covered everything. I mean, remember flying in that helicopter, covering all the ensuing eruptions of Mount St. Helens, covering City Hall, covering homelessness, which is still a problem here in the city. Really, I was even sent to Nicaragua to cover the Sandinistas. I mean, there was a kind of bigness in Portland, a curiosity about the world that I hadn't been exposed to. There's a kind of there's a quality of life here, an openness here. There's so many people here who come from somewhere else, but there also is this core that came from people who came all the way across the country in those wagons. There's a kind of grit here. There's a kind of, there's such a beauty in the people here. And there is coffee. I have to tell you.
We love our coffee.
When I first went to Los Angeles, I couldn't get a good cup of coffee to save my life. And then when I moved to New York, I couldn't get a good coffee to save my life. Starbucks followed me all the way out, and all the other ones too, Pete's and everybody else, followed me all the way out, and thank goodness they did. But Portland has something all to itself. There's a kind of, it stands on the cusp of the outside world, with Asia around, and also with this a lot of the original immigrants coming from, the Nordic countries. There's a real, on the cusp of the outside world, and yet a grit and a firmness in the world of America and in Oregon. And I just have, when I get off the plane and I step into Portland, I mean, it's almost like all this, whatever stress I didn't know I had, it just seeps down. I feel I'm home.
My sincere thanks to Ann Curry. Ann and I talked at length, and there's much more to our conversation. You can find it now on the KGW YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.